Welcome back, everyone, to the smartest year ever, our quest to become the world's greatest conversationalist. My name is Gordy, hello, and I was just wondering, did you know that this quiet-looking Scottish doctor is the real-life inspiration for one of the most famous detectives of all time, one of the most famous characters, literary characters of all time, actually. Stick with me for 5 minutes, I bet you can work this into a conversation today, and like and subscribe if you haven't, so you can keep up. I do this every single day. Probably never heard of Dr. Joseph Bell, but you've definitely heard of the fictional character he helped bring to life, Sherlock Holmes. I've been reading all the Sherlock Holmes books and stories. It's been a lot of fun. And I also saw that Sherlock Holmes is the most portrayed literary character in film and TV history. So one of the most famous fictional characters in at least Western literature ever. Joseph Bell was a Scottish surgeon and a lecturer at the University of Edinburgh in the late 19th century. He wasn't a detective. He didn't live at 221B Baker Street, and he didn't have a documented cocaine addiction, but he did have a freakishly sharp eye for detail, a near clinical detachment, and a habit of diagnosing patients with something that felt like supernatural clairvoyance. One of his students was a young medical apprentice named Arthur Conan Doyle. And Doyle didn't just admire Bell, he studied him, he observed him, and then he modeled Sherlock Holmes directly on him. Doyle once said, "It's no wonder that after the study of such a character, I used and amplified his methods when I was trying to build up a scientific detective." And Dr. Joseph Bell was also aware that he was the inspiration behind Sherlock Holmes. Doyle, obviously, he's the writer of Sherlock Holmes. He even once wrote to Dr. Bell explicitly saying, "It is most certainly to you that I owe Sherlock Holmes." Bell's methods were built on observation, deduction, and logic. He believed a good doctor could tell what was wrong with the patient before the patient spoke, just by watching how they walked into the room. And he didn't just keep those skills quiet either. In lectures, he was known to ask students to describe patients in detail, and then he'd go in and point out all the things that they missed, everything that they missed, like the mud on their boots, or like the calluses on their hands, their accent and their voices, like the smell of their clothes, like a specific smell, things like that. And Doyle remembered that vividly. And he said, and these are his words, he said, "Dr. Bell would sit in his receiving room with a face like a red Indian and diagnose people as they came in before they even opened their mouths. He would tell them their symptoms and even give them details of their past life, and hardly ever would he make a mistake." And you probably noticed the phrase "face like a red Indian." That is a 19th century British idiom that meant like stoic or unreadable, like stone-faced. Pretty outdated and racist by today's standards. But I also wanted to include it because it does kind of reflect some of the casual language and biases that do appear in the original Sherlock Holmes stories that I'm reading of like the 1880s. And like you'll be really getting into a story and you'll be like, wow, these characters are so freaking smart. And then they'll just like say something like pretty offensively racist. And you're just like, huh, that was a lot more ignorant than I expected out of some supposed genius. But back to Dr. Joseph Bell. There's another story of Bell meeting a man and then instantly announcing that the man had recently been in the army, he'd served in Bermuda, and he was now a typesetter. All of which turned out to be true. And that is essentially like what Sherlock Holmes does when he meets Dr. Watson in the books. And Bell's talents didn't go unnoticed outside the lecture hall either. He was occasionally called in by police on criminal cases, actually, including there's this infamous one that was called the Ardlamont murder of 1893. And that was an interesting case. I recommend reading that if you haven't heard of it. And he offered his forensic-style analysis of the suspect's testimony. The Ardlamont murder, in short, involved a wealthy young man who died during a suspicious shooting accident on a hunting trip in Scotland. And Bell was brought in to analyze the testimony, and his forensic-style breakdown helped challenge the official story. An extra fun fact, Dr. Patrick Heron Watson and Dr. Henry Littlejohn also testified in that case, all concluding that the shot could not have been self-inflicted, and that Dr. Watson may have helped inspire Sherlock's Dr. Watson. In the 1880s, Bell was reportedly consulted by Scotland Yard as one of the several experts during the Jack the Ripper investigation, too. That's a fun fact. So there you have it. Before Sherlock Holmes cracked fictional mysteries, Joseph Bell was applying the same methods to real ones. And he didn't need that deerstalker hat or the pipe or the magnifying glass, I'd imagine. Just a medical degree and a frightening level of insight and attention to detail. I thought that was an interesting one. Go check out my sources, which can be found in the YouTube description. Give me a like, rate, share this with someone, comment. I'd appreciate all of that. Go check out the 1-minute version I do. It's less than a minute on all social media platforms at Smartest Year Ever. That's how you can find me. And in the meantime, stay curious and stay clever on our quest to become the world's greatest conversationalist. I'll see you tomorrow in the smartest year ever.